Secrets linger in every corridor where power meets prejudice, waiting for someone to shine a light on them. Picture Price rifling through Simone's belongings, each fleck of paper a silent witness to conspiracy and abuse. The question is, will you let it stay hidden? If you think these conspiracies need to be brought into the light, hit like, comment 1, and subscribe for the next chapter in the fight for justice. Price didn't pause for explanation. He simply slammed the handcuffs onto her wrists, the metallic click sounding like thunder in the hushed chamber. Faces froze in shock. An elderly man clutching a wooden cane leaned forward, eyes wide. A middle-aged reporter, ink-stained notepad in hand, swallowed hard. No one moved. The only sound was the soft scrape of Ava's heels against the marble as she was escorted toward the bench. Under the harsh white bulbs above, the scene felt both surreal and heartbreakingly real. Here was a decorated officer's superior, sworn in but 24 hours earlier, humiliated by a subordinate who fancied himself judge, jury, and executioner. Her crisp black suit was rumpled. The single pearl earring she wore swung gently with each step. Yet Ava's head remained held high, no plea, no protest, just a steady resolve that whispered louder than any shout. In that moment, the courtroom ceased to be a hall of law. It became a stage where power was wielded like a weapon, and dignity was the first casualty. Every pair of eyes bore witness to Price's abuse, each one a silent promise that this act would not go unnoticed. And so, with the clang of that final cuff, the story of Ava's unyielding fight against injustice was set into motion. She appeared without fanfare, yet every eye in the room gravitated toward her as if pulled by an invisible magnet. Clad in a simple black tailored suit, no badge, no name tag, she moved with the calm confidence of someone entirely at ease in this hushed arena. In one hand she cradled a thin leather portfolio. On her wrist rested an antique watch, its tarnished brass face a single touch of quiet elegance against the stark formality of the courtroom. Officer Price, still flushed with the triumph of his recent display of authority, couldn't help himself. He leaned toward Sergeant Ruiz, voice low but dripping with contempt. "Who do you suppose she is?" His gaze flicked from the woman's measured breathing to the polished wooden benches, as though expecting someone to leap up and demand her removal. But no challenge came. No bailiff marched forward with a curt order. Instead, the woman simply took her seat in the row designated for VIP observers, an honor reserved for dignitaries, family members of high-ranking officials, or visiting dignitaries. Around them, the air smelled faintly of old varnish and polished oak. The clack of shoes on marble subsided into a soft rhythm as whispers faded. Reporters exchanged puzzled glances. One adjusted her glasses, peering over the rim, convinced her eyesight was playing tricks. A gentleman in the back, gray-haired, suit neatly pressed, sighed and checked the program in his lap, hoping to find a clue to this mysterious guest's identity. There was nothing. No one knew how she had secured that seat. No one questioned why she hadn't been greeted by court staff or ushered to a reserved chair. Price's bravado faltered for the first time that morning, as he studied the way the woman's gaze lingered on the proceedings, unflinching and unhurried. She didn't fidget, nor did she avert her eyes. Instead, she observed with the quiet intensity of someone who already knew exactly what to expect and was ready for whatever came next. As Ava was led from the courtroom, the corridor's fluorescent lights seemed to dim with the weight of unspoken prejudice. Officer Price strode ahead, boots echoing on the tile, and without a word of explanation or a hint of protocol, he stopped dead in her path. With a low chuckle, he drawled, "You think someone like you belongs here?" His shoulder pressed into her back so forcefully her spine tingled. Before she could even catch her breath, Price yanked her chair, a simple folding seat placed against the wall so hard that it scraped across the floor and tumbled into a darkened alcove. Ava's portfolio slipped from her grasp, papers fanned out like startled birds. The hallway fell silent except for the distant hum of the air conditioner. Price watched with perverse satisfaction as she knelt to gather her documents. Then, almost as an afterthought, he reached out and seized her leather tote, flipping it open and rifling through its contents without a word. No warrant, no right. His fingers brushed past her eyeglasses, her notebook, the small photograph of her late mentor tucked in the side pocket, each item treated like contraband. Nearby clerks and officers averted their eyes. No one intervened. When she finally straightened, holding her scattered things close to her chest, Price simply smirked and tossed the tote aside. Just making sure you're not hiding anything else, he muttered, stepping back as if he'd done her a favor. The echo of his boots receding down the hall left Ava standing alone among the shadows and stray papers. It was more than a violation of policy, it was a stark reminder that in his eyes her presence was nothing more than an inconvenient disruption, unworthy of respect or a simple courtesy of space. And in that cold, narrowing corridor, the lines between order and bigotry were laid bare for all who dared to witness. Through every sneer and shove, Ava's lips remained sealed. In the echoing hall, where Price's boots clattered like gavel strikes, she simply opened her portfolio and began to read. Each page, court filings, witness statements, internal memos slid across her fingers as though she were auditioning them for truth. Around her, the world might have erupted in outrage, but Ava chose stillness. Unseen by any but herself, her right hand nestled inside the pocket of her suit jacket, pressing record on her small voice memo app. Price's voice, harsh, condescending, dripping with entitlement, was captured in vivid detail. "Don't think you've earned the right to sit in that chair," he spat. Ava didn't flinch. Instead, she pivoted her phone so its rear camera filmed the cruel tilt of his head and the disdain in his eyes. No one noticed the faint red glow of the phone's recording light tucked beneath her blazer. No one saw the way she subtly angled the lens to include both his hand rifling through her belongings and the rows of silent onlookers shrinking away. Her breathing remained steady, barely registering in the hush of polished marble and hushed corridors. Each moment of Price's unchecked aggression was transformed into incontrovertible evidence: the metallic rasp of his cufflink, the rustle of her papers as she sorted them, his harsh footsteps receding after he walked away. Ava's silence wasn't empty, it was deliberate, powerful. It spoke louder than any retort could, laying bare his misconduct for all who dared to play back her recordings. By the time Price's figure disappeared around the corner, Ava closed her portfolio with precision. A slight press of her thumb stopped the recording. In that calculated quiet, she had done more than endure. She had ensured that every abusive word and act would live on as proof, not rumor, in the unblinking eye of her hidden camera and the unwavering memory of her silent witness. Officer Price's arrogance reached its peak in a single, brutal shove. With a sudden shove, he sent Ava's sleek black folder hurtling through the air. Papers scattered like startled birds, legal briefs, witness affidavits, margin notes fluttering to the floor. Gasps and murmurs erupted across the courtroom. An elderly juror's gavel rattled in shock. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised over notebooks. Even the judge's hand froze midair. Every eye locked onto Ava as she knelt amid the chaos. The crisp hush that followed Price's aggression was palpable. Every flicker of a camera flash, every breath held, bore witness to the raw display of power abused. Yet Ava moved as though performing a quiet ritual. She bent slowly, gathering each sheet with deliberate care. No tremor in her hands, no stutter in her breath, only the soft rustle of paper sliding together. She straightened, folding the scattered documents back into their rightful place. Her posture remained perfectly composed, chin lifted, shoulders relaxed. The weight of the moment carried not on her back, but in her unwavering gaze. While murmurs of disapproval swelled into an undercurrent of collective outrage, Ava seated herself calmly at the defense table. The thud of her chair settling on the polished wood marked a silent declaration. Authority founded on intimidation was unsteady. Price, flush with momentary triumph, found his victory hollow. The courtroom's atmosphere had shifted. His display of force now underscored a weakness rather than strength. In Ava's composed response, a new power emerged, the power of restraint. As she opened her folder, realigning the papers with the same precision she used in every battle for justice, the room recognized a truth far more compelling than any raised voice or clenched fist. True authority, it seemed, lay not in the force of one's push, but in the grace of one's recovery. Ava rose from her seat with deliberate calm, every movement measured against the hushed gasp that rippled through the room. With one hand she smoothed her suit jacket, and with the other she reached into the supple leather of her tote. Fingers brushed against familiar contours until they found the small silver hinge of an ID wallet. She paused, eyes sweeping the assembly, and then flipped it open. A hush fell so complete it swallowed the distant echo of footsteps in the corridor. Price, standing near the witness stand, felt his heart thump in his chest. The polished badge bore the engraved words Chief of Police, Ava Gallagher, framed by the city's seal. A single beam of sunlight filtering through a stained glass window caught the edge of the ID and refracted into a prism of justice across the polished bench. In that breathless instant, power lines redrew themselves. The man who had shoved her, humiliated her, rifled through her bag, now stood paler than the marble walls. His uniform, once a shield of unquestioned authority, felt suddenly threadbare. Murmurs swelled at the back of the room as officers shifted in their seats, realizing that the woman they dismissed was not merely a gawking observer, but their new commanding officer. Ava closed the wallet and pocketed it with a quiet click that resonated louder than any explosion. She met Price's gaze without anger or vindication, only an unwavering clarity that spoke volumes. "Proceed," she said softly, gesturing toward the bench. "I'm here to observe the sentence." The courtroom, once a stage for his unchecked dominance, now tilted under the weight of her revelation. No gavel was needed, the badge had already spoken. Price's shoulders slumped in defeat as every eye bore witness. The very man who thought himself judge and jury had been exposed as the accused of a higher court. And with that single, shining ID, Ava Gallagher reclaimed not only her dignity, but the integrity of justice itself. Within hours of the courtroom incident, a bystander's smartphone clip of Officer Price shoving Chief Ava Gallagher exploded across social media. The video, grainy yet unmistakable, opened with Price's gloved hand forcefully propelling Ava backward, papers flying like startled birds. In the next frame, her composed recovery only heightened the contrast between raw aggression and quiet dignity. Before day's end, the clip had shared tens of thousands of times, landing in timelines and boxes and community groups nationwide. But the backlash did not begin or end with that single moment. Once the public's outrage was ignited, older snippets surfaced from dusty archives. A patrol car dashboard camera showing Price dumping a young man unarmed into the back seat. A security feed recording of him grabbing a female officer's notebook and crushing it beneath his boot. Even a pixelated cell phone video from 3 years ago of Price yelling racial slurs at a community meeting. Each short clip, once dismissed or suppressed, became fresh evidence of a pattern. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Local anchors narrated side-by-side comparisons. "Here is Price's shove today," one station declared, "and here he is, in 2018, racially profiling patrons at a convenience store." Op-eds flooded editorial pages calling for full transparency within the department. Hashtags like #SeeBadge and Justice Gallagher trended on Facebook and Twitter as citizens demanded access to internal records, video logs, and misconduct reports. Community forums, both online and in church basements, filled with animated discussion. A retired schoolteacher in Ohio posted her own recollection of Price's intimidating presence at youth basketball games. A small business owner in Texas shared grainy security footage of a late-night confrontation that echoed the same arrogance. What had been isolated grievances now coalesced into a united call. No more backroom cover-ups. No more silences. By the next morning, the city council convened an emergency session. Donors, once quiet, now demanded answers. Press conferences were scheduled, subpoenas issued, and Price was placed on leave pending an independent inquiry. In that digital firestorm, Ava Gallagher's silence proved strategic, allowing truth once hidden in shadows to surge into the light, reshaping public trust and forcing a department long resistant to change onto a path of genuine accountability. In the wake of the viral videos and mounting public outrage, the police department's leadership sprang into action. Within hours, the Office of Internal Affairs activated its review boards and dispatched investigators to collect every complaint on record. What had once been whispered reports tucked into locked filing cabinets now poured in openly. Deputies who had turned a blind eye, staffers who had sighed but stayed silent, and even a handful of veteran officers who admitted they'd felt uneasy about Price's behavior but feared speaking up. By mid-morning, Chief Gallagher received stacks of formal grievance forms from lawyers, community advocates, and fellow officers. One by one, the signed letters told a familiar story. Uncalled for shove here, a racial slur there, a young recruit berated in private. The sheer volume left no doubt that this was more than a single outburst, it was a pattern. Top brass convened an emergency disciplinary hearing that afternoon. Price was immediately placed on administrative leave, his badge and department ID card collected at the door. As news of the suspension spread through the precinct, the atmosphere shifted from whispered tension to open relief. Officers who once skirted the edges of the hallway to avoid Price's glare now gave brief nods to Chief Gallagher as she walked past. Several mid-level sergeants submitted their resignation letters rather than risk any association with the scandal. Others quietly requested transfers to different units, citing personal reasons even as their curt emails hinted at deeper unease. Even the veteran detectives, those who prided themselves on loyalty above all, found themselves re-examining old case files. A half-dozen quietly reopened investigations in which Price had been the lead supervisor, seeking to verify whether evidence might have been mishandled. And for every officer who departed, 2 more stepped forward with written statements, determined to set the record straight. By week's end, the department's senior leadership had announced a comprehensive review. Every complaint against Price from the past decade would be re-evaluated, and an independent panel would oversee any disciplinary actions. What began as a single act of abuse had triggered a seismic shift, one that left Price cut off from the force he once commanded and set in motion a long overdue reckoning for the entire department. Chief Gallagher convened a modest gathering in the department's conference room, its long oak table polished to a soft gleam. Without raised voices or dramatic flourish, she laid out a single-sheet memo titled "Reboot the Badge." The header was simple, a city seal at the top, followed by clear instructions on how every member of the force, sworn officers, civilian staff, and retirees alike, could participate in a comprehensive ethics review. First, she instructed that all misconduct allegations from the past 10 years be digitized and made accessible on a secure, public-facing portal. No hidden files. No locked drawers. Each complaint would bear a status marker under review, resolved, or pending further evidence, so citizens and officers could follow the process in real time. Second, ABA introduced standardized transparency guidelines. Every new complaint would trigger an automatic acknowledgement within 48 hours, informing the reporting party of next steps. Investigators would be assigned within 5 business days, and interim updates posted online every 2 weeks. This level of openness was unheard of. Yet she spoke with calm conviction. We owe our community more than silence. Finally, she encouraged anyone with first-hand knowledge, eyewitnesses, colleagues, even family members, to submit corroborating materials, photographs, recordings, journal entries, or signed affidavits. Forms were placed on every precinct desk and made available on the department intranet. A small team of volunteer officers chosen for their unimpeachable records would handle these submissions with confidentiality and care. Throughout the briefing, Ava remained seated, her silver badge resting lightly on the table beside her notes. When questions arose about confidentiality or legal protection, she simply tapped the badge and replied, "This symbol represents our collective oath. It demands we do better." By day's end, hundreds of forms had been downloaded and dozens of officers had volunteered to serve on the oversight committee. The Reboot the Badge campaign was not a flash of rhetoric, but a measured, inclusive effort. Its power lay not in loud proclamations, but in the steady authority of a leader who understood that true reform begins when you give both your colleagues and your community the right to be heard. What does this story teach us? It shows that courage can wear the guise of calm, and that change often begins with a single, determined act. Its message is clear: no one should ever have to prove their worth in a hall meant to uphold dignity. Now, I invite you to share your own thoughts. How did the protagonist's silent resilience resonate with you? Have you ever witnessed an abuse of power, and if so, what did you do or wish you had done in that moment? Personally, I believe this narrative underscores the transformative power of strategic silence and principled action. It reminds me that confronting wrongs doesn't always require loud protests. Sometimes it takes quiet documentation, careful planning, and unwavering resolve. When we blend patience with purpose, even the most entrenched systems can be persuaded to change. I'd love to hear your perspective. What would you have done in her place? And how can we together turn this story's lessons into real-world progress? Note: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.